So yes, just like to welcome everyone to today's market briefing, or today's MGAA market briefing even. So anyone who's not had the misfortune to see me on any of these webinars before, just a very quick introduction. So I'm Alison Cairns and I'm the L&D manager for the MGAA. A little bit of housekeeping to do before we move on to the main event. So just a couple of polite asks for things not to do, just to help us with the technology. So that I always say this so that we can stay with you till the end of the presentation and it doesn't go a bit wrong. Can we keep microphones and cameras off, please, if that's okay. In terms of things to do, please do ask our presenters questions. So if you pop those in the chat, and I would say don't think that you need to keep them in mind till the end. When the question comes to mind, ask it and pop it in the chat. We may pick it up as we go through, but the likelihood is that we'll cover it off in the Q&A session at the end. So also, I think Zoom is very good at letting you know, but just to remind everyone that the session is being recorded. And the good news about that is that there will be a link to the recording shared with you afterwards. So if you've got colleagues who'd like to have a look at the session, you can forward the link on to them, because I'll send it through to you. And my very last bit to cover off is just to remind you that our sessions are accredited by the CII for CPD purposes. So if this session meets with your development needs, you can pop it on your training log. So that's my intro and housekeeping done. So that just leaves me to hand over to our presenters. So our session today is Hype or Reality? Could an AI agent really improve your online sales performance? And I'm pleased to have with us today from Opendialog, Danny Major and Ron Ashry. So as you're here to hear them, I will disappear off and hand over to Danny.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alison. Hello, everyone. Thanks for your time and for attending today. So really, the exam question of this briefing today, as you can see, is about our thought process, our approach that we want to be able to share with you around the ability for this new world of AI agents, actually specifically looking at if so how they can help with online sales performance. So I'm joined by my colleague Ron, so I'll let Ron just do a quick intro and hello, then we'll progress.
Hi everyone, great to be here. So I'm a co-founder of Opendialog and the Chief Technology and Product Officer. My background is in artificial intelligence. I did a PhD in AI and sort of worked in the AI space for about 20 years now. It's definitely gotten a bit more exciting in the past few years.
Thank you, Ron. And I'm Danny Major, so I'm the Chief Customer Officer at Opendialog, and I suppose really by that title, really working closely with new and existing customers, and some of that we want to be able to share with you today. So in the context of this briefing, just to set expectations really about what to expect today. This is a briefing as mentioned, but it's actually, as summarised before, about our thought process about exploring how we thought and if we thought AI agents could be deployed to address some of the common challenges associated with online insurance journeys. What we'll actually also do today is take you through our thought process and our findings around how AI agents can actually improve sales, but also with this equal focus on customer experience. And then something that's obviously incredibly important to all of our worlds is about how can you do this, but in the context of regulation and compliance. Firstly, I suppose to set the scene on our approach, our thought process, what we wanted to do was spend a couple of moments just talking about some of the things and challenges to online insurance sales. So something for anyone that works within the insurance space and has either kind of a hand on the way in which you bring in leads, consumers, to hopefully turn them into policyholders. Ultimately, a huge expense is spared on lead generation, and the macro number, really irrespective of using aggregators, fully online quote journeys, and also inclusive of a variety of different insurance categories, is that really north of 70% of those online quote journeys were abandoned. And what we wanted to do as part of this briefing was share our learnings, our findings, and how we thought an AI agent could help. What that means, really, when we're talking about that drop-off, that abandonment, is lost opportunity for insurance organisations. Furthermore, if you think about when you're bringing someone into the cycle, there's also a missed opportunity around how you can start to actually serve add-ons, options, additional cover. And then again, the macro impact for insurance organisations is actually they're performing less well than they could be if they were able to tackle the high abandonment and upsell issues. Drilling into the problem a little bit more, our findings working with organisations within the insurance space, actually we found that there were a number of things that could actually be quite easily categorised into these areas. So if you think about the core, the problem for why people abandon journeys, ultimately the insurance market, we all work within a complex landscape. If you think about people buying insurance for an SME business or for their car or for home, actually there's lots of complex terminology and terms that need to be understood. And the reason there are those complex terms and information that's required is because the insurer, the broker, needs to be able to understand a certain amount of information in order to calculate and qualify risk. Nonetheless, products are complex. Also, a variety of different organisations have made different attempts at how they can help consumers as part of this journey. They can provide FAQs, but they can be quite cumbersome to be able to navigate. There's answers like live chat, but obviously they only have certain hours of operation, and sometimes the person at the other end of the live chat is contending it's above working with different consumers. Furthermore, there's an inherent lack of personalisation. If you're able to speak to a person, they will address you by their name. They will know certain potentially non-personally identified pieces of information about you to make that conversation more engaging. But when you're dealing with a digital experience part of a quote journey, actually, it's lacking that personalisation that you would otherwise get from a person. And then let's again not forget about the backdrop of the reason for the need for compliance and regulation around how you engage with consumers as part of the journey, which also then means that maybe a traditional experience that you might get from something like Amazon or buying a product online, they can make recommendations, they understand information about you to a very detailed way. Within the insurance space, obviously there's a lot more rules and restrictions around how digital journeys can behave, which ultimately then means that the experience can sometimes be considered as lacking to consumer engagement in other areas. So with that, I'll hand over to my colleague Ron, who will shout next slide when it's the time to go on to the next slide. But I'll hand over to Ron to maybe share about our hypothesis for how we may address these issues.
Great. Thanks, Danny. Next slide. Right. So this is, as Danny was saying, this is the question, right? Can an AI agent improve sales and customer experience? Now, before we dive into the details, what do we mean here by AI agent? I'll just break it into two components. There is the whole user-facing side of it. What's the actual interface like? What is the user going to see? And more importantly, is what sits behind it, right? Which is the bit that makes it AI. Is like, what is the reasoning? What's the knowledge? What's the training that we're going to give this piece of software so they can do something useful? Next slide. So the sort of things that we wanted to test and see where we got to are, can we deliver a personalized experience? This means we need to understand a bit about who is the user. It could be, it's great if you have their name, but the more important things here are what type of user they are, what things do we think they care about, what is it that they're doing, in which part of the process are they? Then can we offer ongoing sales support? The phrase that captures it quite well is, if a user is in doubt, they're going to drop out, right? So can we be that service, that piece of software that sits on that online journey and makes sure that if the user has some sort of question, they have a doubt, there's something they need to clarify, instead of saying, oh, this is too complicated, I'm just going to go do something else, or they start fishing around for FAQ pages, or they want to call and so on, the first thing they should try and do is ask the question to this AI agent. Similarly, can we guide them through the buying journey? And then in terms of sort of hard metrics, we obviously want to see an increase in sales conversion. Would like to see an increase in the average policy value. This has a lot to do with add-ons, which we'll talk about in a bit. We want to do all of this while we are complying with regulations, and we'll talk a bit about how we achieve that. And then if you do manage to have an AI agent that is actually helping people, that is improving your sales conversion, so it makes sense as it to be a service on your online journey, at the same time, you have this huge benefit that you're gathering very rich data around how users are behaving on the journey, because you're able to combine the behavior on the actual web page with the questions that they're asking or the decisions that they're making. And, multiply that across thousands and thousands of journeys, and you get something really, really interesting. Now, the last thing, but perhaps to me was, the most important one, because all this is great, right? And given unlimited time and unlimited budget, any sensible team can do all sorts of things. And we know that the real challenge is, yeah, that sounds great. How long is it going to take? How many resources am I going to have to dedicate to get this problem solved, and so on and so forth? So a huge challenge that we set ourselves is actually you should be able to do this with minimal involvement from the IT department. This is not some huge digital transformation project that's going to take months and months or years and years. We're talking about a few weeks at most. Most of that is just getting people organized in meetings and so on, and you have something that is delivering value, and you can start measuring and you can start understanding if it actually helps you or not. Next slide. Okay, so let's get a bit more specific. How do we actually do this? Right? I'm not going to get technical, but there is sort of a high-level description that we can offer. If you could jump forward, Danny. So our AI agent, which is a wonderful piece of software, we sort of gave it a bit of a personality, so it makes it easier for us to talk about it and think about it. So meet Selma. What do we do with Selma, right? I just split it in terms of the information that we provide and what that gives us and how that sort of feeds the cycle. So the first thing is customer support knowledge, right? And this is what I'll call these days, honestly, is table stakes. So Selma has knowledge of policy documents, processes, rules, opening hours, all that stuff that you would expect a customer support agent to know. You can provide to Selma through documents, through web pages, PDFs, all that stuff is ingested and it's available so that we can answer user questions by it, right? There's plenty of stuff out there that does that. As I said, this is table stakes. Now, where it starts getting interesting is the next thing we feed into Selma is actually user-specific data. Right. So if you imagine a journey that's maybe coming from like an aggregator side, there is a bunch of information that is associated with a user. We don't need to provide all of that information to Selma. We pick the information that is relevant based on what we want our AI agent to do, right? So we feed that information into the AI agent as the user arrives on the site and the AI agent starts up. And that's information that we're going to use throughout to customize how we answer the customer support questions so they're actually relevant to the user. And then how we help the user through the buying journey, or how we try to suggest alternatives to the user. The next thing is what we call behavioral triggers, right? So there's essentially two ways you can interact with Selma. The first one is where you actually go and ask a question because you're going through the process, the question popped up, so you have access to the AI agent and you can just ask the question. But at the same time, the AI agent is in a way monitoring the page and listening for events. It could be that in a list of add-ons you've said no, or in a drop-down you've selected a particular choice, or after you've filled in 2, 3, 4 different form elements, there is a combination of data there that we think is interesting. We think we should intervene and let you know something relevant, right? So those are the behavioral triggers that we will define with the client so that we can proactively intervene at the right moments. Then the last thing is what we call sales persuasion tactics, right? Which is maybe too many words to simply describe the fact that you have this is the sort of knowledge that a customer support agent or a sales agent in your contact center would use when a user calls up and is trying to figure out what would be the right combination of add-ons and so on, right? So we literally sit down with you and learn about what are the things that you think are important to what segments of users. If you have data that backs this up, even better, but it doesn't require a lot of deep data. It requires knowledge of the domain and your customers, which you absolutely have. And we provide that to the AI agent so that when those behavioral triggers trigger, it will access those persuasion tactics to compose a message that is appropriate for the user to help them along their journey or to help them change their mind and so on. So you have this 4 broad input categories. Obviously, we want all of this to lead to improved sales outcomes, but then the other thing that it gives us is buying behavior data, right? So as we see how those 4 things, those sources of information that we feed into the AI agent interact with the user, we can see how that changes user behavior positively or negatively, and that can lead to further learnings, and that sort of gives you a feedback loop that can continuously improve itself. Cool. Next slide. So just a couple of minutes, because I sort of mentioned on this, some of this stuff on what it is that we do more specifically. So if you imagine like the very first moment a user lands on a page, we can greet them with a personalized greeting that can involve their name, but it can also involve something specific around, I don't know, the brand of the car they're interested to get an insurance around and so on. We can use any of the pieces of information that we have to give them a message that makes them instantly feel much more welcomed instead of, sort of a cold, hard form with no other information around it. There's then a whole bunch of behavioral triggers that we look for. Maybe the simplest one is, if they are looking to close the page, you can sort of raise your hand in a way and say, is there anything we could help you with? Is there anything you're in doubt about? The most interesting one is this turning no's to yeses. This was the most interesting, challenging one, and the one I was most excited to see that we could actually have an impact. So this is when a user goes through a list of possible add-ons and perhaps they've said no. We will selectively, not always, selectively, if we think there is a really strong case for that specific type of user to be made, that they should reconsider their choice of no, Selma will offer an alternative, right? Say, have you considered that given X and Y and Z about your situation, this might help you in this ways, right? And as I said, that was the most challenging one because you're literally stepping in as someone just said no and you're asking them to reconsider. Talked a bit about abandonment, and we'll talk much more about what's the data that we collect along the way, right? So these are all things that come sort of out of the box with the AI agent. Okay, so that was the hypothesis setup, right? Can we have an AI agent sitting within a digital journey? Can we do that without triggering a huge IT transformation, digital transformation project and so on, just in a few weeks, added to the page? And we were lucky enough to have some great customers that worked with us for some initial deployments. And what we're sharing now is the data that we got. So Dan, if you move forward. So this data is from an experiment that we did where we actually started, we sort of a pure A/B test, as in 50-50. 50% went through the journey with the AI agent, 50% went through the journey without the AI agent. And eventually, as we ramped up, we sort of moved more of the traffic to the AI agent, but left a control group so that we know that we're having what sort of impact we're having. And the end result was there, right? It's a 15% increase in conversions and about a 12% increase in add-on revenues. Yeah. Again, I think to me, you get a good enough team and you put enough money into something, you will get results. These results were obtained. We started the project. It literally took us just 4 weeks, and this was the first one, to launch it. And by the end of the second month, we were looking at results already. You take one step forward. Yeah, it's just worth saying, the 15% increase in conversion extrapolated to what that does in a year's worth of traffic. We are talking about millions in revenue. And I think one of the biggest questions for us, which we'll get to now, is it's great to get positive data, but you have to intimately understand it, and you have to be sure that it's you that's making the impact and not something else. So we also obviously did all sorts of statistical analysis to make sure this is statistically significant and all that stuff. But then there was that more in-depth, okay, why is this exactly happening? So if you go forward. So the very interesting finding was all that stuff I talked about, looking for a potential abandonment, looking at hesitation, trying to change the user's mind around whether they're going to add an add-on or not. What all that does is engage the user with the experience. And it's that act of engagement in and of itself that drives the higher conversions, not necessarily the specific outcome out of a specific request. What do I mean by that? What we've seen is it doesn't matter, we get a higher engagement, even if the user says no to our request to them to reconsider their choice of the add-on, right? But the fact that we've sort of had them pause for a second and think it through, and then, okay, they've decided that they're not going to add that add-on, still, that creates that moment of engagement. And because the message is not just some sort of generic, did you know that, but it's specific to them and they perceive it as specific to them because that's how the message is structured, it creates that connection to the experience on the page, right? So you combine that together with personalized greetings, together with the ability to ask questions as they come to them along the journey. And what we've seen is the higher the engagement, the higher the probability of conversion, right? So Dan, if you go one slide up. So it's that act of interaction, and actually we should say that personalized interaction, that contextual interaction, that that interaction that makes sense in the context of what they're doing, that in and of itself creates value, creates a connection to the experience, regardless of whether they've actually said yes to the add-on. Initially, we were super focused on, how many more add-ons could we sell, right? Because that was like the exciting, easy thing to look at. And yes, you do sell more add-ons. As we said, we've kind of increased the value overall by 12%. But the impact we've seen in overall conversions is far more significant than the impact on add-ons, which, depending on the type of insurance product you're selling, may not necessarily be very high value, very significant to your business, right? Cool. Any more?
So I think it's just a slide from me then, and we'll kind of delve back into some of the other agenda items. I think probably some learnings, and equally as Ron's articulated, these were learnings from in-life deployment, working with real customers on the deployment of Selma. I think the initial catch is about, great, you're helping with conversion, great, you're helping with add-on attachment, and then there's all these insights that can be gleaned in the form of actually what led someone to make this particular choice. I sometimes refer it to as one of the secondary benefits of Selma, but actually it's probably maybe one of the primary benefits as well. And this is around when you deploy an AI agent that is engaging with consumers and allowing consumers to ask different questions throughout the quote and buy journey, actually there's a richness in that information. And it's actually led us to quite interesting conversations with customers around, okay, well actually, how is certain information presented? Are there commonalities in questions that are being asked that maybe should change slightly how the quote journey is structured or the way information is presented? I think a great one was along the lines of a consistent theme in questions being asked around, okay, if I buy this product, am I covered to use someone else's vehicle as an example? And that may be information that you can glean from casting questions out to human agents and getting people in a room to try and ideate and vote on common things raised by consumers. But when it's an AI agent, that information is empirical. And then some of the reporting capabilities of Selma actually allow customers to get insights into those questions. So probably pause there in interest of time, but ultimately just highlighting the point that yes, conversion is valuable. Yes, add-on attachment and option is also valuable, but there's a huge value in the data and insights that can be gleaned by having an AI agent that is a companion to that quote journey. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Ron, on some of our results and what was proved.
Cool. Yeah, if you could move forward. Next slide. So I think the outcome of now sort of a series of experiments that we've done across a few different settings. The first one is, yes, a personalized proactive AI agent can positively influence buying behavior, and it can turn no's into yeses. Now, I'm not going to, there is there was a big concern because you're stepping in people's journeys here, right? You imagine yourself, you're interacting with a page, you're sort of doing something on the page, and because you've made a selection, something pops up and says, hey, I think you should reconsider for this reasons, obviously phrased appropriately. So we were concerned that actually the main reaction of people would be, please get out of the way and I need to get on with my life, right? And I think out of thousands and thousands of journeys, we did have a couple of times where people just said, please stop. But the overwhelming experience of this is you actually get a significant amount of people that do reconsider, they change their mind, and that leads to an overall increase to what you've had before. And I think the thing that makes this really work is that actually that engagement is not something that the majority of people perceive as incredibly annoying, but actually helpful and something that changes the whole nature of how I'm going through this journey. And the last thing to say, just reconfirming what Danny was saying, you get incredibly rich data out of this experiment. Right, let's go on to the next slide, and we'll talk a bit more about compliance and how do we ensure compliance, right? Because this has been the constant throughout Opendialog's journey. Opendialog, today we've talked about this AI agent, Selma. Selma is built on Opendialog technology, and the reason we started Opendialog is because we've always thought there is a different way of building AI agents that would allow you to really tightly control how they behave. Now, there's always two sides to this. On the one hand, the technology has to give you the control so that you can decide how the AI agents should behave. And the other side of it, you should be able to prove this, right? So if you step forward, Danny. So in order for us to prove it, we've developed a benchmark, which we call SAFER, that tests against a number of things that we consider are important in this context, and we can test against them because we are obsessive, literally, about the amount of data that we store, how many different steps we take to take decisions so that we can always have tight control around what's happening, right? So very quickly, without sort of getting into the details of it, we test against this 5 things. So the first one is security, all the different ways that you can sort of get large language models and generative AI to behave in ways that you don't want it to behave. We have ways to solve that, and with the SAFER benchmark, we test how effective that is. And when we go into a client, we can add their data to this security test, right? So that we sort of expand our data set so that everyone has that confidence that this is working in the appropriate way. Then the other thing is, are we understanding the context, right? So if the user asks a question, do we actually understand what that question is about? Having understood what the question is about, do we then retrieve the correct information to answer that question, right? So you need to understand what the question is, then you need to go get the right information for that question, and you shouldn't be making up information or hallucination and so on. And then once you've understood the question, you've got the right information, you generate a response. We need to evaluate that response to make sure that it's in line with FCA guidelines, any other company-specific, organization-specific guidelines and standards and so on, right? So there is that evaluation phase that follows the detection and the fidelity. And then sort of the flip side of all of this is you also need to know what not to answer, even though as a large language model, you could potentially answer any question that gets thrown at you correctly or incorrectly, right? So you need to recognize not just malicious use, but also things like, give me a recipe, what should I cook tonight, what do you think is going to happen with the game, football game, and so on. There's nothing necessarily wrong with those things, but it's not things that you want your AI agent to be dealing with. Cool. Danny, I think that's back to you.
Back over to me, yeah. So we've again kind of taken you on user label journey, if you will, around a thought process of, given we already operated within regulated industries, and we had AI agents, actually, could we use AI agents to serve this or address this particular problem? And then with the work that we did with some of our early customers and customers since then, Selma became a thing, addressing all of the items that Ron has mentioned in almost the problem statement of the thesis. Needs to be always available, it needs to be an expert, it needs to be personalised in the way in which it engages with consumers. But then equally, something Ron was alluding to, actually, if you get to a particular point where you just need to put a human in the chair, ensuring that Selma has a way to be able to safely do that as well. So we've spoken a lot about the background, how we got to Selma. What we want to do now is almost show Selma in action. So just before I start the demonstration, to give a little bit of context, what we're showing here is Selma operating within a post-aggregator journey, but by means of the deployments of Selma, we support full web journeys, we support post-aggregator journeys as well. And we are operating as a companion to the journey as they enter the final stages of their quote and buy, but then equally haven't yet made a final decision. So Selma can operate and interact in a variety of different ways. We can be quite embedded into the journey, or equally as a pop-up, as you can see here. Talking on this personalisation and engagement point, actually straight away Selma has presented opportunity to engage with the user using that non-personally identifiable information so that we can present a fact as an example in their vehicle. The user here is looking to understand more information about a particular add-on, and it's framed that information in a way that, oh dear, it's jumped on, hang on. It's framed that information in a way that allows them to ask additional questions about that product as well. So this proactive and reactive way in which Selma can interact and have a continual dialogue around the products. What we're also able to do here is take those questions that a consumer would have. So again, common questions around cover, specific maybe details around operating in European countries. What Selma can also do here is also provide links to other assets and pieces of information as well. As you'll see from this demonstration, it also handles all things like spelling mistakes within a certain level of control as well. But it's really about providing that experience that you would actually get if you were talking to a human at the other end of the phone. So it isn't just asking a question and getting a fixed response. It's about using the contextual information that's been collected in order to provide that engaging experience, which then, as we've discussed, the byproduct of that is about increasing conversion, which is really kind of that top level goal. As part of this demo, we also, this is kind of a great example of taking some of the in-life findings and insights, so we can further train Selma to handle common objections and questions as well. And you'll notice that the language that is used is very definitive. It's a yes. We're not being woolly, if you will, around the answers that are provided. And just to reiterate that point around when you do need to hand off to a person. So in this example here, actually, it's trying to change some non-editable information. If we need to hand off to a person, there's a variety of different ways in which we can do that, but by supplying the quote reference number, we're ensuring that there's also a contextual handoff to a human at the other end of the phone if the conversation carries on that way. So we thought it would be useful to see Selma in action. We've got a barrage of other demonstrations as well, but hopefully this helps better understand how Selma can complement an existing journey and do all those fantastic things that we've spoken about previously. Just to really bring to life on the final few slides around the focus of Selma. So it is, again, about making sure that the engagement is contextual. As mentioned, we can be embedded into the journey in a few different ways, and actually the experience and the way in which Selma manifests itself to the user is incredibly important. So actually it isn't a vanilla, this is how you engage with Selma. Part of the design experience of working with new customers is to better understand how we present Selma in a way that is going to be engaging. Coming back to some of the earlier problem statements around actually why people drop off, that real-time assistance is incredibly important. If they're waiting for a live chat to be available, and again, they're contended by 3 or 4 other people in the queue, actually people are going to drop off. So fundamental aspect of Selma is how we can provide that real-time support, but again, leaning on approved knowledge and content so it's engaging in a consistent and accurate way. It's also about being personalised, so we're not throwing the same information up to every single consumer as part of the journey. We're using that non-personally identifiable information and the history of the conversation with Selma to present it in a way that is incredibly personalised. And then, as mentioned, where a human needs to be involved, a human should be involved, assuming people are available to respond. So as part of the design ethos of Selma is, okay, at what point should we put a human in the chair in order to carry on that conversation and journey? Lastly, I think before we pause for questions, and really coming back to that opening part of how we theorised how an AI agent could help, really just drawing us back to some of the numbers of in-use clients of Selma today. So Rob mentioned that I think we're within a 2-month time frame, we were hitting north of 50% of policy conversion. We've had greater months than that, but obviously it's something that fluctuates over time. Not every month is the same, but incredibly powerful results by what we've been able to see in consistently increasing conversion compared to journeys that aren't supported by Selma. Additionally, that changing behaviour where people thought maybe an option, an attachment or an additional cover item wasn't for them, but then being able to engage contextually so that we can help them better understand potentially the value and applicability of that add-on attachments to them. And then going back to some of the graphs and statistics that Ron has shared, by the nature of someone engaging with Selma as part of a dialogue throughout the quote journey, we've seen that there's a 70% increase in the likelihood of conversion. So extracting that across thousands of consumer journeys really does make an impact into the way in which we can start to increase conversion, but also lean on the data that's collected to further improve both the way Selma engages, but then also the overall quote journey as part of that. So with that, if I've guessed next correctly, and I have, we were going to pause for some questions. So I'll just stop sharing just so I can see my slide. We've got a couple that are hidden, if I just get in the chat, and then I think there's Alison said, feel free to throw questions in as well. Let's look at one of the first ones. Was this idea something you built and went to market, or something that you collaborated with a client on? So maybe I might throw the first one to you, Ron, if that's okay.
Was this idea something we built and went to market or collaborated? I think it's both, right? We sort of had this hypothesis that there is something there that we could help with, but the way we built it and then went to market with it is to find customers that were willing to work with us, and we were very open with them, right? We said, we think this might work. We don't know if it's going to work. If you're willing to work with us and try this out, let's run the experiment. We'll do the A/B tests and see what happens. And thankfully, it was good results.
Well, we've got me here today, yes. Next question. How long was the initial implementation, and when did the client start to see value? So I think actually, I'll probably paraphrase this, but you kind of mentioned the way we started working with our first client on their first brand. And really within a month, the heavy lifting of the work was done. And then the subsequent weeks later, we saw the increase in conversion, probably also the increase in hours on attachment, which I think we'd hoped and expected something would happen, but probably equally surprised by the results. And then obviously, I think the other thing to call out probably as part of that question is the work doesn't stop when it's live. You get the data, the input from consumers, so there's always more improvements that can be done and learnings that can be taken to then roll out to other brands and further deploy Selma. Next question. What are the prerequisites to Selma to add value? Do I need a specific insurance application for this to work? So when Ron was, I'll say this one, give you the next one, Ron. But when Ron was presenting, actually, one of the inputs into the hypothesis was around how can we do this without it being a large-scale IT and almost transformation project. So the way in which Selma operates is that it engages with the web layer. So there's no deep integration into a policy administration system or quotation engine. We sit at the web layer, and as such, it's incredibly quick to be able to implement and iterate Selma. But to the question, actually, that also means that there's no prerequisites by means of technology footprint. If there is a quote and buy journey, be that something that's supported post-aggregator, as we've shown, or something that is entirely driven through a quotation portal, Selma can help and add value. So hopefully that answers the question that was raised there. Next one is actually around Safer, so I will give you this one, Ron. So how does Safer work alongside any other governance tooling and data that I have?
So Safer is a set of benchmarks, right? So I would say if there's any other tooling and governance, it sort of complements what's there already. The reason we developed Safer, if you've sort of engaged at all with what's happening with large language models and so on, you'll often hear people talk about, I don't know, how GPT-5 beat Gemini 2.5 in the MMLU or some other acronym of a benchmark, right? And those are a series of tests that these large language models go through to prove how intelligent they are or are not. Those tests are great, but they tell you nothing about how it's actually going to perform in the context of your specific domain, especially if it's a regulated environment, right? So what we wanted to do is develop a series of tests that are specific to regulated environments and specific to insurance in this case, by taking broad data sets of the types of questions, both good questions and bad questions, and knowledge that exists or shouldn't exist, and so on. So there's this broad range of tests that you can run. We sort of have the infrastructure and we have our data sets, but you can bring in your own data to add to the SAFER benchmark to make it more specific to your context. Right? The point is, it's something that tests our technology from outside. It's not inside. You can run it completely independently. You can also run it against other things if you want to compare. And we'll tell you something specific about this regulated environment context.
Perfect. And then last question, unless any others are added into the chat. This is a roadmap question, Ron, so I'll give you this to you. What would the next phase or iteration for Selma be?
There's a whole bunch of things. I think I'll put it in 3 broad categories, right? So the first one is what the user experience is. So the demo you've seen is a relatively straightforward chat window that pops up from where all the sort of solutions pop up from the bottom right-hand corner. You can ask questions. If you click on the page, you'll see a pop-up within, you will see some text update within the chat window and so on. There's all sorts of other things we can do. We started quite conservative just to prove that this is an avenue worth following. But we're now getting quite ambitious, I would say, around what the user experience looks like. So that's the first bucket, kind of making this even more engaging from a visual perspective and more useful to the end user. The second part of it is how perceptive Selma is, what sort of different things it is able to, what sort of different signals it is able to ingest and use, right? And there is a huge number of things that we could use. It's about identifying the right ones. And then the last one is once you get data from Selma, how actionable, directly actionable do we make that data, and how deep it gets, and how much of it you can get, and so on.
Perfect. We did have one other question, which will Selma work within a mobile buying journey? Short answer is yes. Just I suppose a statistic from some of our work with insurance organisations. Normally only about, north of 80% of quote and buy journeys are done on non-desktop devices. So what we're saying there is actually probably the desktop browser demonstration that we did normally only equates to about 20%. So the 80% is mobile, tablets, all of those different and actually much smaller screen interactions as part of the quote journey. When we implement Selma, it's reactive to the device, responsive to the device that is on. So actually, rather than being bottom right-hand corner, actually might take a portion of the screen on the phone at the bottom. So in the implementation of Selma, actually mobile design is actually more frequently used than desktop. So something we address and optimize from the outset. So I hope that answers the question there. There's no other questions. So Alison, I might hand back to yourself.
Thank you. I have got one very quick question for you. I was just wondering, from experience of very helpful chatbots, and you pop a question in and it says no, you need to ask it another way, and after about the 5th time you go, it really doesn't matter, the moment's passed. I was just wondering if you've any sort of feedback from the end users. Do they always realise that it is a non-person all the way through? But as the experience is a lot better to other chatbots, I wonder whether they perhaps just think that there is a person there at 2 a.m. answering their query.
Oh, my lips were moving.
So we From a design principle perspective, we try to make it quite clear that it's not a person. I think there's nothing more annoying than thinking you are talking to a person and it ends up that it wasn't. So it starts up with, I am a virtual assistant, and so on and so forth. Obviously, not everyone will read that and they might misinterpret it as something different. But yeah, we think it's important to make it clear, look, you're talking to something that is a machine, is a piece of software. With respect to, it is not always going to get things right. And I think it's a lot about just being very honest with the user about what that is. And when that happens, obviously in our case, I think because we're using sort of the latest in terms of what you have in large language models, it happens less and less. But when it does happen, it's just a very clear, look, you might can connect you to someone, or I don't have information to ask this. And sometimes it's just random, someone mistyped something. So some characters escape, and you still need to provide a sensible response to that, which is not, please rephrase it, because that's quite annoying.
No, that's really helpful. I'm just thinking because it is quite a different journey to some chatbots where they are just a cycle until you've been worn down and you give up. But no, I think we've no more questions in the chat, and we've got 2 minutes left. So I think we've filled everyone with knowledge. But the contact details are in the slide pack, aren't they? And I think we can share those when we share the link with everyone. So yes, just a big thank you to Dan and to Ron for joining us today and sharing all that information on Barcelona, and Selma, because Selma was there as well. Shouldn't forget her. And and thank you to everyone for turning up. So yes, I will share the link with you, which will have the recording, and you'll have the contact details. And also there'll be a link to the feedback survey. So I would be very grateful if you can drop us a note with your thoughts on the presentation. And I will, yes, on that note, say thank you and leave everyone to enjoy the rest of their day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right.